welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. My guest today is singer-songwriter Cassandra. Thanks for coming to the Sanctuary today.
Thank you so much, Israel. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sweet. So I'm just going to start with Love Country because I just noticed you had the lyric video up. What is the story behind that song? It seemed a little, I mean, I know it's country, but it seemed a little bit too on the nose. Am I right?
Yes. So the song holds a very special place in my heart. I am indeed a city girl, and I dated a country boy once, and the memories that we had were unmatched. I mean, it was just really, really nice. And I wanted to write a song. It was almost an ode to that. It was several years ago. And the truth of the matter is the song is Love Country, but in reality, it's more of an appreciation for country and appreciation for nature and the simple things in life, which, I grew up in Atlanta, so I didn't necessarily understand them or have those same appreciations. And so the song actually started as a big pop country jam. It was very fun. But it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like me. And I was like, you know what? Let's strip it down. Let's make it much closer to pop and see what happens from there. And it really, my producer, Scott Griffin, did a great job of just capturing this sweet nostalgia and this feeling of, and as the bridge says, our love didn't last. But I absolutely do smile when I look back and I have this nostalgia and just joy that I had that experience in my life. So, yes, that's the overall.
Yeah, no. Like I was like, it seemed too real. It's like listening to the lyrics, especially now, on your YouTube where I can actually follow along and kind of sing along. Really, it's like, oh wait, this is something that could really have happened. And so it's great to find out that there's some basis to that. Did you always wanted to be a singer?
Yes, so I always have. Ever since I was a little girl, I used to, when I was 4 years old, I would wear a little cheerleader costume around the house and sing The Sound of Music at the top of my lungs, which is super silly. And my parents saw that and were like, you know what? I think this girl wants to sing. And so I gravitated toward the arts from the start. And as time went on, I eventually, when I was, I think, 11 years old, I began voice lessons. And my backstory on that is that my mother actually used to sing when she was younger. And she was a fabulous singer, but she never followed it. She instead was a physicist because she's brilliant. And she went for that instead. Yet when she heard that I wanted to sing, that I could sing, she said, let's first work on training your voice to be really legit, like get your technique down, get your sound right, and then sing whatever you want to sing, but get your technique first. And that's kind of how I started toward classical music. It's how when I was 11, I started taking lessons and continued on with a couple different teachers. And that was during my time living in New York. But it allowed me to really train my voice classically and get that legitimate technique down and understood. And it's what also led me to study opera at school right now. And from there, I've been able to, just my understanding of my instrument as a whole, how to take care of it, develop it, utilize it, has really increased. And it's always been something that I've always wanted to sing pop, but I always sang classical music just to train my voice properly. And I love it. Yeah. But I knew it was in my heart to do this.
Oh, man. You were talking about voice training, all right? Talk me through this. Like,
yes.
When you're voice training, what things you do? And is it possible, like, for anyone just to train their voice?
Absolutely. So first thing is anybody and everybody can sing. It's a matter of, I guess, how much you practice. Well, no, everybody can sing. You can be trained how to do so. You can train your technique, your breathing. It might take a certain amount of, I guess, just an artsy person to be able to say, okay, I'm going to think of my voice in a certain way, because I've had voice lessons where somebody said, imagine you're a squirrel jumping from a tree and imagine what that feels like. And you're like, what? That's personally not how I tick. But some people get that and they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. For me, I work with Lisa Safer at the New England Conservatory, and she's fantastic. And the two of us talk about it, and she's like, you need to take your alveolar ridge and you need to focus the sound toward that, which is that like hard little ridge at the top of your mouth, and work on how to use your soft palate and utilize that back space of your soft palate to flex and bend as you need it to. So it's everybody learns differently. Some people are more, for lack of a better term, out there in how they wish to learn. And I'm very technical. I've always been interested in medicine and anatomy. And so for me, that's been kind of my go-to for how I learn. But to go back to the original point, anybody can learn. It might take a few tries to figure out how you learn to sing, but anybody can. And honestly, it comes down to knowing what it is within your own skull structure that will allow sound to work best. So for me, I have a very narrow jaw, but I have like a high cheekbone placement. And so therefore, where I point my sound is going to be different than somebody that has a very wide face or a very tall face. And it's learning that. And it's learning, for me, I do a lot of humming to try to get my sound to come forward. And then I do a lot of work with trying to keep everything very loose in my neck, my jaw, the back of my throat, and everything else to try to allow this sound to happen. And it differs between opera and pop. And that would be a very long discussion if I tried to explain that one. But it all comes down to understanding that first thing that comes is the breath, second thing that comes is the resonance, and then third would be the placement of where you're directing your sound.
That sounds like Greek to me. Like, how do you direct your sound? I mean, like, I'm talking now. I don't like, but then I guess that's what you get when you're trained, like when you're classically trained.
Sure.
So, your mom got you to take voice lessons, and then, you started, it's funny because now I'm seeing you doing Love Country and all these new songs you have on your Spotify. And I'm like, wait, she does opera, and like, who is this person I'm watching now? And like, you do both great. So like, how did you get into opera, and why did you decide to switch to what you're doing now?
Sure. So as I was saying, with the studying of classical music and taking classical voice lessons, getting that technique was the pinnacle of my music studies all throughout high school and so on. So when it was time to go to college, I was nuts and I applied to 28 colleges because I wanted to study biochemistry. I wanted to do a full degree in music. And I used to be a tournament tennis player, and so I wanted to continue on and play. And I had various offers that I was looking at, but when I received my offer into the New England Conservatory, I kind of figured, this is an incredible opportunity to go study classically, because I had just known that my whole life. It didn't even feel like a question. It's like, okay, of course, I've always trained classically, so now it's time to go study classically toward becoming an opera singer. And my teacher's fantastic, so it just kind of felt like the thing to do. But when COVID hit, I started thinking about what I was doing with my career. Performance venues were shut down. There was no way to do anything with my career. I couldn't teach, I couldn't sing, I couldn't perform, I could do nothing except for maybe perform for a Zoom screen. And it really got me thinking about, why do I do this? And what do I want to do? How do I want to build a career within this? And the glaring truth that came forward was I loved singing, and I really, really liked classical music. But if you look at what I listen to, my daily streaming, my daily interests, it all revolves around pop and pop culture. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer to start looking at, how do I do pop? How do I get into that? And I got very lucky. A good friend of my brother's, his name is Brian Ruby. He's a baseball player, but he's also a country songwriter in Nashville. And he's fantastic. My brother said, just give him a call, see what he can do. And so I gave him a call, and we ended up talking. And like 2 weeks later, after our call, he contacted me and said, do you want to write a song? Just, come up to Nashville and we'll record it for you here, but let's hop on Zoom and do a Zoom write. And that was the first of many Zoom writes, which was very, very cool. So it's just been great. And it opened my eyes to with classical music, what I love about it is that I'm a coloratura soprano, which means that my voice sits really, really high and very light. And what that allows for in a lot of the music is they call it ornamentation. So it stems from the Baroque era, way back when. But basically, you have a piece of music, and the singer is meant to look at the piece of music and say, okay, this is the bones of what it is, and I'm going to essentially riff off. That's like the pop term for it. But you do your own version of the piece that you get to orchestrate. You get to decide how you want to sing that. And there are many different ways to do it.
That's a lot of responsibility,
I always knew that's what I loved. Right. It's a lot, and you have to think, what is this composer who is no longer with us? What would he think of the ornament that I'm about to assign right now for classical music? But I always knew it was that the liberty to have creative freedom within a piece that just grabbed me. And so when I started thinking about pop, I'm like, I feel like I love to talk. I know that. My friends will tell you that. So I love to talk. And I have so many stories from my life that I want to share with people. Why not write songs? And the way that writing music appealed to me most was to write pop songs. And so when I had this, the first opportunity, the song Made for Me is what we actually wrote. That was that first Zoom write that I ever had. I wrote it with Brian Ruby and Drea Gordon. And the three of us wrote the song called Made for Me. And it was so much fun. I remember I hopped off the call and I hadn't felt so alive in a very long time, especially during COVID. But just that feeling of, oh my gosh, this is my story. And I'm going to get to share this with the world. And the song is actually releasing April 16th, so I'm very excited. We did the EP in reverse order of writing it, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool. So this song, though, it kicked off this feeling of, I'm going to take my creative energy and I'm going to tell my story with the world, and I'm just going to do it for me, which is actually the whole premise of Made for Me, is being yourself, doing what you want to do for yourself and not for anybody else.
Is it scary, though?
Surprisingly, no. My team is so welcoming that I have felt like I've walked into this with just open arms, no fears, which is wild to me. I don't know. But I think it's why I feel okay with saying that I'm putting out a song every single month of the year. I don't feel any reservations about waiting on my music. I'm like, let's just keep it going.
And so talk me through what a Zoom write will look like. You get the link, click it, and then what?
It's the first Zoom write, definitely. I take that back, actually, about the scary part. The first Zoom write was totally scary. It was my first time writing a pop song fully. Like, I had kind of written before, but nothing that I ever would have recorded. They were self-writes, whatever. I was terrified, and I felt like the writers were flying, and yet it took us 5 hours to write this song, which is so funny because now we can finish a song in like 2 hours without thinking twice. But that's just time and practice, right? So a Zoom write, you come into the write. I always try to do my homework beforehand. As the artist, what's nice is that all my writers know the write is specifically, we're trying to write a song that I'm going to cut. And we're trying to build up this back catalog such that even if I don't cut all of them, I could cut them at a later date, or I could give them to another artist, whatever. But I try to come in ahead of time because of that with an idea of, what do I want to say today? What do I want to talk about? And you take that idea. So for instance, with Love Country, I said, there was this boy that I dated for 2 years and we had some wonderful memories together. And I kind of want to write an ode to that. I don't want to write a song about an upsetting breakup. I want to write a song about appreciating that and appreciating what we had. And they were like, okay. And so you start talking through different ideas. And so Love Country is actually a great example of how the Zoom write works. So, you hop into the Zoom, you say hi to everybody, and then I just kind of spew for a good 5 minutes about what I want to write about that day. And everybody's jotting down notes. We keep a Google Doc open on our computers, and we write and write and write and write. And as we're writing, somebody will keep a voice memo open, and we call them work tapes. And it's basically just a little checkpoint of, hey, this is what we thought should be for the verse or the chorus or whatever. And like with Love Country, we first wrote that, we wrote the chorus first. And the whole idea was, let's list off things that I used to do, some real life experiences. And that's where the backwoods hikes, dirt road drives, windows down, screamed rascal flats, and so on and so forth. It all came from that. And it was just as I was talking about examples, writing, and then somebody or most people have a guitar in hand or a piano in front of them and are playing chords and playing around with it. It's incredibly collaborative.
Yeah.
I have to say, which is really nice. It's nice to work with a group of writers that appreciate that collaborative aspect. Because it's a fun way to work with other people and learn from them as
Yeah.
well. But
No, that's great. So like they'd be playing instruments live while y'all, coming with ideas and stuff and writing or what? Holy
yes,
shit.
yes. So it's tough because with Zoom, of course, there's a lag
Right.
time. So you can't, I've written with them in person in Nashville now. We were all COVID tested and had a safe, gathering. And that was great. Like we do an outdoor campfire, right? And everybody's got their guitars and you're hearing somebody do something and you're like, yeah, that's it. Like, let's sing that. But with Zoom, it's kind of, you have to think out your idea ahead of time and then bring it forward because essentially everybody else has to mute for a second while you play out your idea and then somebody can chime in. But it definitely feels like, one person has to have the talking stick at a time because you just can't do it any other way.
Right.
Which it's weird, but I will say it has forced me to become a better writer than I think I would have in the same time frame. Because before I can even put forth an idea, you don't want to say your idea and have it be terrible after you've made everybody else stop their ideas, right? So you kind of have to think ahead and say it, which is, it's neat, it's different. But with that too, you'll hear somebody playing something on guitar or whatever else, and sometimes I'll just mute as somebody's riffing on the guitar over and over doing the exact same chord progression. And I'll sing through the part on my end or I'll, whatever. And then make a voice memo, send it around. So it's a lot of record something, send it to try to keep that lag time from being an issue. But
So you did a couple of Zoom writes and you thought, you know what, this might be better in person. You came up with the COVID protocol that worked for everybody. And then you go to Nashville. How was that very first time?
oh my gosh, it was a dream. So this EP Made for Me that I'm releasing, it comes out on the 16th of April. It was a wild weekend. So I recorded 4 songs in 3 days. I think
How was your voice?
I don't even
How
know.
was your voice?
This is where the opportunity comes into play. I was fine.
You can direct your voice where you
totally
want
fine.
where you wanted to go.
Let me tell you, it was, luckily my team is very, very, they care a lot about making sure that my vocal health is okay during those weekends. So we would make sure no studio session lasted for more than 3 hours. And we would go, and in between, I would try really hard just to not speak. And I don't know how, but I was fine. And I still had more in me. Actually, the next day I had a performance for school, for my opera school. And I was able to still sing for that somehow. But it was amazing though. It was really, I know, I have to say it was weird. I don't know how it happened. It still seems like a bit of a blur, but it was great. We got in town and my parents traveled with me, which was nice. We got to the hotel and I woke up in the morning and headed to my producer's house and all the writers were there and we all talked about, okay, we're going to go into the studio. When we get to the studio, here are the tracks. Let's sing through it a couple times, make sure we feel good. Think about, what inflections do we want to do? Do we have any last minute lyric changes, whatever else? And then we head down to the studio and I hop in the booth and it's just go time. It's like lock in, jam out. I kind of dance at the microphone, which it's my most embarrassing thing I think that I do while I'm performing, but I full blown jam out. I am, and I think, I hope it shows in the music because I have so much fun singing and I have so much fun being in that environment. And so, you go in, you record, and then in between that, we would have writing sessions. And so be it within the studio, if there was a space that was good at the studio to do so, or if we did an outdoor write by campfire, something like that, we would all get together and everyone would bring their guitars or whatever instrument they wanted to use. And same thing, which the song, we wrote one song that weekend. Well, we wrote two that weekend, is actually, which was wild because we recorded four and wrote two in 3 days. Um, but one of the two that we wrote that weekend is coming out in June.
Oh, okay.
So I'm excited for that.
So yeah,
But totally different
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
When you set out there, did you know you were gonna write that? You were gonna record that many songs?
Yes. So we
Oh.
planned it out. It was, so we wrote, let's think here. I wrote Made for Me in April, May of 2020. And then I wrote Love Country, Like You, and Drinking Games were all written in the September to October timeframe. And then I traveled to Nashville in the first weekend of November. And because I'm in school and because of winter break and COVID levels rising, I was like, you know what? I want to come in now before everything spikes during the holidays, record, get everything done. And then when we want to look at a future date of recording again, we can look at that and we can write leading up to that. But it was just a really good way to have everything done, work on all the projects. Everything was set out well ahead of time. I mean, what's wild to me is that I am releasing Made for Me just about a year after writing it. Which is wild because Drinking Games we wrote and recorded in, I think, less than a month. So it all takes time and varying
Yeah.
time, but I think it's that planning ahead that really works. It's like this past trip that I took to Nashville, we recorded two songs, and one of which we finished a week before, and the other one we actually started writing the week of that trip, which was
Yeah.
wild. I still don't know how he made that happen, but my producer is great, and he was able to actually have a track ready to go by the time I hopped in the booth over at the studio. And my writers are just awesome, being able to help me pump out a song out
Yeah.
quickly. So it's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Um, let's go back a bit. You applied to what, 28 schools?
Yes. So I applied to 28 schools. I wrote 53 essays to get
Jesus.
into college.
That's crazy. Anyway, so you know
I don't.
you get positive results from a number of places. How did you narrow it down to New England Conservatory?
So it was very tough. By the end of it, I was actually debating between Vanderbilt and the New England Conservatory, which was hysterical considering now all of my pop work is in Nashville and I'm in Boston. But when I looked at the scope of everything that I had applied to, it was very obvious to me that if I tried to do everything all at once, I could do it. I certainly could have. I definitely could have handled the workload. I would have been able to work my schedule as such. But in terms of really developing my voice and focusing on it, and everyone always says, if you're going to do music, you have to be all in on music. And I was always kind of like, yeah, like I've gotten myself together and I've done everything else under the sun. I mean, sports, academics, whatever. And so it kind of just took me a second to step back and say it might be really wise to see if you like music when you're only focusing on music, when you don't have other things distracting you. And that's when I started narrowing down to really focusing only on conservatories. And from there, it was just a matter of, if I went to Vanderbilt, I knew that I was going to have so much work coming from the other fields of study that I'd be doing, that I wasn't positive that I would be able to focus as much on music as I would like. And then when I heard the offer from NEC, I think we're third right now for opera. We're ranked number 3 for opera.
In the
And
United
my
States?
teacher, Lisa Safer, I believe in the
In
world.
the
I'm gonna
Oh
have to
my
fact check that
gosh,
one.
that's
I believe so. I could be wrong. If not, then it is the United States. But
yeah.
regardless, the school's fantastic. And I heard I was going to study with Lisa Safer, who, if you look up Lisa, she is legendary. She's the only coloratura soprano that's ever won the Met National Council auditions. She's just incredible. I mean, name the stage she's performed there. Her teaching is so spot on. The way that she works with me and how she is in terms of supporting me in all the different types of music that I want to do, but also in nurturing my voice and my instrument. I couldn't be more grateful that I'm working with her right now. I mean, it's just every single time I have a lesson, I walk away like, I'm the luckiest little vocal student in the whole world. This is so cool.
That's such a great feeling.
It really is. And so for me, you know, I took a trial lesson with Lisa before I went to NEC, and I walked out of there just like, this is where I have to be, and that's all there is to it. And honestly, I'm so happy that I did, because it's given me clarity and my desire to pursue a career in music. Absolutely has.
So I've never been to a conservatory. What is a typical day like there?
So conservatory life is weird. It is nothing like normal college at all. I have a brother, he goes to normal school. He hears about my day and he's like, what is going on over there? I don't even understand. It's cool. So it's a very small school. We're about 700 students in total, and it's 3 buildings in total. That's the whole thing. It's on one little corner in Boston, right next to Northeastern University. And the days are packed with music, of course. So there are no other classes and no other subjects. And it's just, so I would wake up, I'd have choir. I would go to classes such as, so for vocal majors, it's a little different. We have to be proficient in Italian, French, German, and then we actually have diction classes so that we learn how to really properly speak and sing the languages, which are surprisingly different, speech versus the vocal diction. But we have to have that for English, American, French, German, Spanish, and Italian.
I'm sorry, that's a...
Maybe
What?
It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm in French right now, and I'm like, I can't take anymore. There's too many languages bouncing around in here.
Like, why do you have to learn all these languages?
Well, for opera, we have to sing in all of them. So it's about learning how to, and if you think about, you know, an opera singer's lifestyle, it's travel to a place, live there for 6 months, travel to a place, live there for another 6 months. And so you want to be able to speak with your conductor, your other, the other people within your show or your opera, the instrumentalists, the people at the grocery store, whomever. But, you know, you're going to have to be wherever you are for a while. And so knowing at least enough to get by. And of course, when you're in that immersion, you learn more so quickly. But that ability is huge, just because the big thing with NEC that I love is they really care about making sure that when we graduate, we are professional opera singers. We are ready, or classical singers, whatever you choose for your final destination to be. But
wait, what's the
they want
difference?
to make sure that you are professional. So a classical singer can sing things such as art songs, and it's not necessarily in a large production, but you might be a solo singer. So if you were to see, you know, somebody is singing at a certain stage, so somebody could sing with the BSO and do a solo performance there with them. That would be more of the classical singer route, whereas if you were an opera singer, you would be trying to audition to get into an opera at a performance venue such as the Met, or, you know, I have to say the Met just because I think it's very well known. But that's more the idea with that. So it's a show versus a solo performance.
Which one are you going to do? Do you know?
I don't know yet. It also, I think, depends certainly on what happens with pop. Because if this takes off, then I absolutely would love that. I probably would lean more toward opera, though, if I were to pursue the more classical style of singing.
Why?
For me, it's the ability to put on a character and have that role is so much fun. I mean, I love singing song. They call it art song or just song, and it's beautiful. But there's a certain extent to which when you get to, you know, it's the costume and the makeup and being able to say, how does this character that I'm now dressed up as, looking like whatever, how does that pertain to me? How can I relate to this character? And how can I create something unique and different out of this character that was created hundreds and hundreds of years ago, before I was born, before my grandparents were born? How can I relate that to today, 21st century, or whatever setting they decide to put it in? That to me it's very invigorating. It's all about that creative freedom and energy and spirit to be able to do that, that I just love in music.
Yeah, you know, I mean, again, don't know anything about the opera, but like, do they ever write new ones, or it's just the old ones over and over again?
Oh, there's tons of new
Oh,
ones. It's amazing to me because so when I went into the conservatory, I had pretty limited knowledge of classical music. It wasn't very, it's not the most popular thing for people my age to be studying opera. People hear that and they're like, "You're doing what? That's a thing? You can actually study opera? What?" And honestly, I would have said the same thing if it weren't for my teacher that I had in New York. Barbara Powell was my teacher in New York, and she was great. And she worked with me to kind of say, "Hey, this is a possibility." And so when I got to the conservatory, the amount that I learned, because I hadn't really thought about it beforehand, was wild, including the idea that there are these new operas and new composers. I even have some friends right at the conservatory right now that are composing and composing operas, and it's amazing because they're people my age that are composing operas, and I'm looking at them like, hey, I think, I would love to play that role, or I know somebody that would be great in that role, and they're actually looking at performing it.
wow.
So it's very neat. Yeah, it's a constantly evolving field. It's just a very niche one, I think, in the grand scope of things.
Okay, I like learning new things, and that's definitely something new to learn. So, of all these languages you're learning at the conservatory,
Yes.
which one is the easiest to learn, and which one is the most fun to learn?
Oh boy. Okay, so I would say the easiest to learn for me thus far has been Italian, just because I'm Italian. I've been hearing my family speak Italian my whole life, even though I didn't speak it. So just in terms of understanding how the pulse of the sentence, like where the stress in a sentence goes, I already had that in my ear when I started. I had heard so many phrases that as you go through class, you'd be like, I recognize that. That's cool. And I had taken Spanish in high school. They didn't offer Italian or else I would have taken it. But I took Spanish for years in high school. And so they're very similar languages. Of course, there are significant differences, but the cognates were present. So that definitely made it easier. And in terms of the most fun, I can't say for French yet because I feel that I still have a lot more to learn in that language. But German, I had so much fun learning German because I was terrible when I began. I mean, like truly awful. I think I might have been the worst German speaker in the class. All of these kids went to a music high school and had heard it before, had heard it, had spoken it, had sung more pieces. I had done one piece in German my entire life. And I really knew nothing about the language or how to sound it at all. And my teachers were so patient with me and just really were like, okay, here's what to do. And I studied and I worked and I listened and I really, really tried, right down to the point where I think it was 2, 3 weeks ago. I had a professor tell me, oh my gosh, you're doing it. Like you're speaking German, your diction, it's right. You're saying it, it's okay. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. So I think just being able to have that progress and watch it happen for
Yeah.
myself has been really invigorating.
Um,
Yeah.
that's great. One thing you mentioned when you're talking about like learning all these languages is that there's a difference between speaking it and singing it. What's the difference?
When you're singing, there's so much focus on keeping that vowel space present that you sing what might not be pronounced.
Why?
It's little things like that. It's because when you're singing the classical style, you really want to focus on, they talk about like a tube of vowels. So you're trying to consistently have this airflow happen and resonate and continue on think of it almost like a never-ending stream of air. So you want to keep this sound and this light tension almost through the sound that allows this phrase. I think a
Oh.
good difference, honestly, is you think about like pop singing. Pop singing is it's punchy, it's to the point, it's very quick. But if you think about opera, it's this long, long, long line. The phrases seem to just keep going. And that's all due to this idea that the vowels should connect to each other and any consonant should just kind of like pop in between it. It's not a focus on the consonants per se. So it's very, very different. But yeah, so that's why something like French, you have this, they call it a mute E in diction, but you pronounce them, whereas you would not when you're speaking. So, yeah.
You know what? That's so much. Like, how do you do all that and then still have time to write and then still go to Nashville and then still record? And how do you have time for all that?
How do I do that? Honestly, I think it's just that I drink a lot of coffee. I really do. I love coffee. Like if you ask any of my friends, I ran a fitness page for a while, and I think the bio was like self-proclaimed caffeine queen. Um, I love it. It helps me get through all of it. Honestly, I say that, but I'm kidding in a way. I mean, I still drink coffee, of course. But what it really comes down to is I love what I'm doing. And I know that sounds cliche, but I really, really do. I mean, I wake up every single day, and even the days when I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed, I'm exhausted, somebody just let me sleep. By the time my feet hit the ground, I'm already thinking about, I get to do all these fun things today. It's a perspective switch too. I mean, it's very easy to look at my schedule. Like today, my day actually goes from noon until midnight with no breaks.
Whoa.
My day is, wild. And I could look at a day that goes noon to midnight with no breaks and go, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And it's very easy to do that. But I try to make it a perspective switch. And for me, it's, some people don't have the opportunity to go do this. And I have the amazing privilege to say I get to wake up every single day and not study one kind of music, but study two kinds of music. And I'm very fortunate. I have a family that supports me in that and encourages me to do that. And I have a passion that people keep saying I should continue to do. And so I look at all of those blessings and I try to say, you know what? I could look at this and say I'm stressed out of my mind and I don't know what to do anymore and I just need a break. Or I could wake up and say, I love what I'm doing and I'm so fortunate to have the opportunity to do this. I might as well just appreciate it.
Wow. A lot more people need to have that, one person says it's like, I get to do this versus I have to do this, I get to do all these cool things. But, oh no, I have to go and do that. But let's go back to pop, right? First off, you did something cool where you're releasing the song in the reverse order. Did you actually plan that out, or did it just happen that way?
I think it just happened that way. I planned my songs actually based on the holidays that surrounded it. So I knew I was initially considering releasing starting in December. And then I talked to my writers and they're like, why would you do that? Then your music's stuck in 2020. Like, push it forward, make it release in 2021, and at least you have that timestamp on it. I was like, that's a good point. So Drinking Games, I thought, okay, well, what's that song about? It's about not liking late night drunk texts and all of that. And so I was like, you know what? New Year's is a time when I'm sure a lot of that goes down. So I'm going to release this on New Year's. Then people listen the next day and be like, darn it, she's right. So that was one. And then Like You just seemed too perfect to not release on Valentine's Day. So that was pretty perfect. And then Made for Me and Love Country, I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do when, but Love Country, it was such a sweet song. And I thought, you know what, let's save this for springtime, which I released it right around March. So it wasn't too late, too far into spring, but it was pretty early. And then Made for Me was just a really good title for the EP as a whole. Because it really was made for me, right? Like I've been doing classical music and I've been studying that and worrying about taking this plunge to pop because I didn't know where to start. And so the whole EP, the purpose of this first EP is I needed to find my sound. I needed to decide if this is something I really wanted to pursue. And it's something that I've always wanted to do that I finally just said, I need to make it happen. And so it was really made for me in that sense. And when you hear Made for Me, it really speaks to how I've been my whole life in terms of being very independent and very unapologetic about that. And wanting to basically express to people that it doesn't matter if you don't like me. It doesn't matter if you don't like what I do, whatever, that's fine. I'm not made for you. I'm made for me. And so I thought this was a great way to finish the EP, wrap the whole EP as one. And on my, one song a month release schedule, it's happened to land in April. So
that is awesome. I think I'm gonna play out this episode of the show with Love Country because I really really love the song. And I'm gonna let you go, but before I do though, you've talked about the conservatory music, doing all these things you love. But like, what is something that, I guess, what is something about music that makes it, I guess, what is something about music that you really love it the way you do?
That's interesting. So I like that question a lot, actually. It's kind of making me think right now. What I would say in terms of what music does for me and what I like about how music has affected me is that, throughout my entire life, as I said, I've had so many stories about my life, and my personality is very bubbly. It's very, expressive. And I think that music allows me to really hone that in and describe it in a way that words can't. I feel like I have so many thoughts and opinions about various things that are hard to express in just words, and are more of a feeling. And when you can use music to capture that feeling, I think it's really special. And I think it's something that I have found, and I'll wrap this, I guess, on a quote that I've said numerous times. And actually you'll see it's in my website, it's in my bios, everything. But I always say doors open and close all the time. But if you're not looking for a door, you'll never see one. And I believe that it's about, creating your own opportunities and going out and seeking what you want and not allowing something to stand in your way. And I feel like with music, it's an endless possibility of what you can do, right? There's no one way. It's completely up for grabs. There's no one way to do it. And so I think with that, there are endless doors. And when I'm constantly searching for a new door, a different door, a better door, it's allowed me to have this freedom and this invigorating fire inside that's just kept me going my entire life, where I feel like I'm wanting to see what's the next thing that I could do? What's the next better way that I could express myself through this? And I hope I'm sharing that well through my music. I'm excited for what's going to come in the summer.
Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait. I think it'll be great to have you back in the sanctuary, because I didn't get I had a set of questions in my mind just for this character you play on TikTok. So he's a guy with his hat back. And I'm gonna it would be great to actually just talk to that guy.
Oh my gosh. I could put on the backwards hat and do a whole nother podcast and talk to you about what he's doing. I would love to do that. And if you'd like to schedule another interview, I'd be more than happy to do that. That's a very fun topic.
Is so interesting. It's so interesting. I love him. Thank you so much for coming to the sanctuary, and I can't wait to hear Made for Me.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to releasing that and sharing it with everybody. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. I'm looking forward to meeting again and talking more with you, and having you on the sanctuary.
So you have this huge link on your Instagram, but what's your Instagram again?
My Instagram is Cassandra. It's the same as my TikTok. So my TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram are all Cassandra, spelled out just as it would be. And then my Twitter is the same thing, but they don't allow YOU. That's too many letters. So it's just U, like letter U, Cassandra.
All right. Man, so Cassandra, thank you so much.
You play guitar, or maybe it was just the